Hi everyone, Kim Peremsky here with Agile Prowess, and I wanted to talk for a few minutes about story points. So much discussion and debate about story points. Don't use them. Yes, you should use them. I've never really been a fan of saying always or never. I believe that we should be using these tools and techniques as tools in our toolbox, and more importantly, we should focus on the appropriate way to use them. Now, if you want to be very particular, you won't find the words story points in the Scrum Guide. You won't even find the word estimate in the Scrum Guide. The Scrum Guide simply says that teams should size the work. And because it's a framework, it doesn't tell you how to size the work. Some teams might just break down their work small enough and they pull in a set number of product backlog items every sprint. Other teams use relative story points. I will say that I'm not a big fan of sizing work based on hours because it's very precise and it's very focused on time alone. And as the economist John Maynard Keynes once said, it is better to be roughly right than precisely wrong. And I believe story points provide a way for teams to do that. I do have a couple of pointers for how teams can leverage story points more effectively that I'd like to share with you. So, number one, I recommend that teams use story points to forecast the work, not as a measure of productivity. A lot of times, teams will get to the end of the sprint, they have work that they have to carry over, and they want to get credit for that work. And that's because they're using those points as a measure of productivity, not as a tool to help them forecast whether they can bring a certain amount of work into a sprint in the first place. My second suggestion is teams should not be compared against one another in terms of story points. So a lot of folks, a lot of teams will use this as a way to compare whether one team is better than another, and I don't recommend that. I also know that some frameworks recommend creating a standardization across teams. And again, I think it's more important that individual teams have that freedom and flexibility to set their own scale and use it in a way that makes sense for them. Tip number three is that you should establish some baseline stories that are pointed so that you have something to compare against. We always do a better job of comparing against something else versus trying to size something kind of in a vacuum or independently. And my fourth tip is that if you use story points for sizing, you should be sizing the effort, not simply the time. And I will have a follow-up video to this one where I go into more detail about what I mean by sizing the effort, not the time. I hope this has been insightful, and as always, I'm interested in your comments and feedback. Take care.